Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and let attendees in. Is that okay? Can you hear me, Crystal? Okay.
Yes.
I hear you.
Okay.
Can y'all hear me? I haven't accepted interpretation yet.
I got you. Sorry, I just wanted to check.
Okay. I think Cristal is an interpreter because I couldn't hear him speak right now.
So I'll just go ahead and I will say only a few words as you told me in your email, and then quickly turn it over to you all, right? So you can get people in.
Literalmente solamente el welcome, porque if you say more than that, you should just interpret for yourself.
Super. No, I'll say, hey, thanks for joining. Please listen in. We're going to hear from Somos Sur. Okay.
And then can you say that in Spanish?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for telling me because I don't mind, but I think, wait a minute, I'm just blocking them because they're interpreting. Right. I got it. Okay, I'll say kind of hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. And then we'll go to that in a couple minutes. Thank you. Okay, let me let folks in now.
Are you in the interpreting thing, Ceci?
Hold on, I think we can. Cristal, did you accept the interpretation feature?
I can't hear you either.
She didn't.
Oh, I see your chat.
You can hear me, Asia?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did Ceci accept the interpreting thing? Because I haven't accepted the welcome window yet. So folks can hear
you.
I can hear both of you talking at the same time, and I don't know why that's happening.
I can't hear her at all.
I'm slowly letting you all, I'm slowly letting a bunch of folks in oh boy, this has happened before. I got a bunch of people that are in as Leone Bicchieri. Okay. So I'm letting a bunch of you in. If you can hear me, just hang on for a minute. Yeah. Okay. So I'm slowly getting some more folks in. Sorry, it's just kind of a wacky time. If you can hear us, just hang in. We're letting all the rest of the participants in that are waiting, and we're going to get started in just a minute. Vamos a empezar en unos minutos, ¿ok? Espérense, por favor, un minutito, y ahorita vamos a empezar. So I am getting a few announcements that the person cannot talk because they're using an older version of Zoom. And so I have to promote them to panelists so that they can talk. So I think
Leone, that person won't be able to hear the interpretation either. So we need everyone to have the most recent version of Zoom.
Okay, which is too late for that. Very sorry about that. Okay, well, a number of people do not have that problem, but some people do. If you can hear me, I'm trying to figure out if some folks can hear me.
I can hear you, Naomi.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Some people can. Okay, well, I'm so sorry.
I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so sorry because a number of you are listed in my participant list as Leone Bicchieri. Me, like there's 8 or 9, and I'm so sorry. So that has happened before. Some of you are not. So as we go ahead, we'll just ask you to identify yourself, but I don't want to wait anymore, okay? Because I know that what you could do me a favor, everyone, please. There's a few of you that don't need to, but I'm just going to ask everyone. Can you type in the chat your name so we know who you are? Because many of you are under my name. I don't know why. Si pueden, por favor, escribir en la máquina, usar la tecla para escribir que sale en los mensajes a la derecha, tu nombre. Porque muchos, no sé por qué, pero mi computadora los están nombrando en mi nombre. But we're going to go ahead. Vamos a empezar. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to have the interpreters say a few words to get everyone ready, and then I'll continue. So primero vamos a invitar a Somos Sur, al equipo de intérpretes, que les vayan a decir unas palabras para que entiendan cómo escuchar en inglés o en español. Por favor, please go ahead, Somos Sur.
Leone, I think we're having a little bit of audio issues. Cristal is not able to participate on audio, so I'm just going to do the full thing. Cristal, bueno, tenemos un poco de problemas tecnológicos. Mi compañera Cristal no puede hablar o escuchar, no estoy segura cuál. Cristal, ¿puedes hablar? ¿Puedes oírme? ¿Puedes hablar? No puedes oírme, ¿verdad? Cristal, ¿me oyes? ¿No? No me oyes. No me oyes.
I think we just go ahead, and I think she was probably in the interpreter function.
I don't think she is, Leone. I don't know. I don't think we're going to be able to. I think we're going to need to just try to restart. Can you turn on and off the interpretation feature? And then we can both do it and then try the interpretation feature again.
Okay, I turned it off. Thanks, everyone. Just hang in there a minute. Espérenos un momentito, okay? Estamos tratando de arreglar bien esto, okay? Is that okay?
Cristal? Cristal? Okay.
Okay. Well, so we're having trouble. First time in the last few months, very sorry. We're having trouble with the technology. Everything looks fine, but it's just not working to do the interpreting. Tenemos problemas técnicos con la interpretación, la traducción. So espérense un momentito. Vamos a seguir porque we're not going to be able to wait. We have someone, unfortunately, that probably has 10 or 15 minutes more, and they were going to say something before they left.
I can stay at least 30 minutes. I'm good.
You can say 30 minutes. Thank you, Reverend. Okay.
Thank you. Leone, Cristal is going to log out and log back in.
Okay.
Vamos a intentar otra vez. Cristal va a entrar y salir otra vez. Muchas gracias por su paciencia a todos. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. Do you mind turning the interpretation feature off for right now? Thank you. Great. Mientras entra Cristal. Oh, ahí estás.
¿Me escuchas?
Sí.
Okay, we got it.
Okay,
I'm here.
No lo
de
prendes
nuevo.
todavía, León. No lo prendes todavía. No,
Okay.
no lo prendes todavía.
Okay, okay. Go for it, go for it.
Ok, buenas noches a todos. Tal vez me reconocen, he estado con ustedes en otras ocasiones. Mi nombre es Cecilia, uso pronombres AX. Mi compa Cristal está aquí también con nosotros, otra de las intérpretes que también usa pronombres AX.
Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe y'all recognize me. My name is Cecilia. My pronouns are they, them. I'm here tonight with my co-interpreter, Crystal. They also use pronouns they and them.
Y cuando terminemos de dar la introducción de cómo usar la interpretación, vamos a hacer una prueba. Pero mientras, si se recuerda,
Before we do the interpretation, we're going to do a practice round.
Si se recuerdan bien, van a ver un globo cuando Leone prende la función de interpretación que va a estar abajo en su pantalla de Zoom, y ahí van a seleccionar el interpretación y luego el idioma, ya sea inglés o español. Y si son bilingües, lo pueden dejar apagado.
When Leone turns on the interpretation mode, you will see a little globe at the bottom. You click it, and then you can choose whatever language you want to use.
English or Spanish.
Oh, yeah, you can decide whether it's English or Spanish.
Y si están en su celular, usando la aplicación de Zoom en su celular, van a ver 3 puntitos. Le seleccionan ahí, ponen más y luego escogen idiomas, interpretación de idiomas, y ahí van a escoger el lenguaje, ya sea inglés o español. Otra vez necesitamos que todos hagan una selección para poder escucharnos a todos.
If you are using Zoom on your phone, you will see 3 little dots on the bottom right corner. It says more. You choose it, go down to language interpretation, and then you can choose whatever language you decide to use or you feel comfortable using.
Les pedimos, por favor, que hablen lento, Leone. Solo menciono un recordatorio. Pausen después de las frases y de las preguntas, porque nos toma, la interpretación siempre está un poquito delatada, como 2 a 5 segundos.
We ask y'all to speak slowly. Leone, just a reminder, please speak slowly at a slow pace. Pause after phrases or sentences. Interpretation lags between 2 to 3 seconds.
Si miran que hacemos esta señal y venimos a cámara, significa que hablen un poco más lento.
If you see this signal on camera, it means speak a little slower.
Tal vez lo pongamos en el chat también.
Maybe we'll add it in the chat as well.
También, y recuerden de hablar en voz alta, claro. No hemos tenido este problema tanto, pero si es que es necesario, usaremos esta señal para que hablen más fuerte.
Also, remember to speak loudly and clear. It doesn't happen too often here, but just in case it does, we will be using this signal, which means speak a little louder.
Y también lo van a ver en el chat.
We may also put it in the chat.
Y por favor manténganse en silencio si no están hablando, porque eso va a ayudar a poder escuchar las voces de todos sin importar el ruido que esté, sin que el ruido alrededor esté interfiriendo.
Please ensure you are muted. Your microphone is muted. It helps us hear those who are speaking without any background noise.
Creo que es todo por ahora. Por cualquier problemita, ahí nos mandan un mensajito en el chat y les podemos ayudar.
I believe that is all for now. If there is any issue that comes up, send it to us in the chat and we'll be able to help you out.
Ok, Leone, ahora sí. Y vamos a hacer una prueba. Yo estaré en el canal, bueno, vamos a hacer una prueba. Yo me pongo en inglés, Cristal, y Cristal en español, y ahí nos van a escuchar.
Okay, Leone, we're ready to go. We're going to do a practice round. I will be in the English one and Crystal will be in the Spanish one to see if y'all can hear us.
Real quick, Ceci, can you just let people know, I mean, you just let them know, but just a last reminder that you're about to turn it on, because some people are commenting that they can't do it yet.
Sí, gracias.
Right now.
Solo que si no lo pueden escuchar ahorita es porque no lo hemos prendido, lo vamos a prender ahora. Y en unos segundos van a ver el globito y es cuando hacen su selección. Lo veo yo. ¿Tú lo ves, Cristal? Oh, no te oímos.
That might be a good sign. ¿Puedo oír? Okay. All right. So Asia, can you hear me? Asia?
I'm here.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Can you hear me, Adriana?
Yep.
Okay. I just want to make sure because I'm about to launch into my spiel and I'm not going to talk as fast as normal. So let us know in the chat. Hopefully everything's going to go okay. And thank you for waiting. We just had a little bit of a slowdown. So I want to welcome you. I know many of you, the majority of you, I know either very well or a little bit. Some of you I am acquainted with, and a few of you I don't know. I really appreciate you making time. For those who don't know me, my name is Leone Jose Bicchieri. I'm the Executive Director of Working Family Solidarity. We're not going to spend much time talking about our work, and my presentation is going to be more of an elongated series of a couple comments, because this is not so much a teach-in as a dialogue. So my presentation is going to be 10 minutes maximum, and really just to get us thinking. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of U.S. immigration and how I see it. I've been working on immigration issues and organizing immigrant workers for 32 years, sometime in this country and sometime in other parts of the world. And I've worked in several states, in urban centers and rural areas, but I've lived in Chicago now for about 12 years, actually 20. But my first 8 years I worked on national campaigns, so I was not in Chicago very much. So I really appreciate you being here. And again, the topic this evening is anti-immigrant hysteria, anti-immigrant sentiment, and why it still persists. And you know that you're on a call in a meeting with Working Family Solidarity. And those of us who know us and others who don't know us as well, you can tell by our name that we believe that it's paramount to organize workers. And when we talk about workers, we don't mean those really poor people. We probably mean you too, if you're hearing me at this moment. Some of you make almost nothing, and some of you make a decent wage, but you wake up every morning and you sell your labor to someone. Very few of us are in the wealthy owner class, and in this country that's been racialized. And so we have an analysis of race that goes together with class, and that goes together with immigrants, and especially immigrants of color. So I'm going to speak for a couple minutes to get us started. I'm going to ask one of our board members, Reverend Felicia Campbell, after me to say a few words, sort of to start moving us towards comments. And then my colleague, Adriana Avila-McClintock, will say a few words. Then we'll move on. I will offer Daniel Ash, and I'll tell you who he is in a minute, to see if he wants to add a few words throughout the dialogue. And then we'll just open it up. I'll facilitate, but we really would love to hear from as many people as possible. Some people are shy. They don't want to talk. That's fine. You can talk without putting your camera on, or you can chat. You can put something in the messages, in the chats, if you don't want to speak. We want to hear about people's experiences. We want to hear about your thoughts, your analysis. And the idea with this, until we can be doing these like we normally do, all together in a room, and then come out of that room with a strategy for a neighborhood campaign. And I'm not going to talk about that much tonight because we don't have enough time, but we will be coming back to that soon, I hope. We'll see about the vaccines. And so for now, we're using these dialogues to continue building solidarity, to bringing in new people. If I saw correctly, we have one person on our call from Italy, from the country of Italy. And she was living in Chicago some years ago and has stayed in touch with us, and she works on migration and immigration issues in Italy. We also have a gentleman named Axel Fuentes, who's a good friend of mine. He has a great organization in northern Missouri. He's from Guatemala. He's on the call. So we have some people from outside of the state, and we have people on the call from various neighborhoods in Chicago. So just to kind of get us on the same page, I'm going to say a few things now about U.S. immigration history and a few things that I think about it. And then we're going to move into Reverend Campbell, Adriana, and just open it up, okay? So if you ask me, and again, this is not a formal and long presentation, and the history of immigration to the United States is a long one. And I can barely do any of it justice. So I'm just going to talk about a couple points to get us started and a couple points of view. So the history of U.S., and I'm going to say for the purposes of a few comments, starting in 1776. And we all know that pilgrims came from Europe and were coming into a country that They were, in many cases, invading, and there's a whole history I'm going to leave out. I'm going to talk about once the U.S. started calling itself a colony and a country. The U.S. immigration policies, since that time, in the opinion of our organization and in my opinion, have been largely overlapping with racism and production. So if you look at U.S. immigration law, and we can't really do that history justice today, but overall, and I urge you to look at it more closely because I can't do much in a few minutes today. So look at the different dates when certain people from certain countries were allowed to come here, why they were coming here, and why they were sent home. And if you look at that history, what we believe at Working Family Solidarity is it was largely, again, based on forced labor, either slavery, and we all know about the slave trade, which was not immigration, of course, but just the bringing of very poor people of color to this country to produce wealth for others. That has been essentially the history of how U.S. immigration laws have worked. So a lot of you remember who worked on the railroads in this country a long time ago. It was not only, but many thousands and thousands of Chinese immigrants, right? They were given special visas, brought over to work, and they had to work on the railroad. Similarly, with Mexican migrant laborers, I worked in the farm worker movement about 10 years full-time before I came back to the Midwest about 2 decades ago. And a lot of those visas during World War II, you remember the Bracero program, bringing in Mexican workers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, to basically pick crops and do all kinds of work. And guess what happened after a few years? They were told to go back home. And a lot of those visa programs, I can't get into the difference between H1, H2, H1A, H2A, H2A is agriculture, HB, but there are many, many visa programs in this country over the decades and now that let you come into this country, do a specific job, and then you go home. When I was in the farm worker movement, I met many Filipino, mainly men, in California. We always think of Mexican labor, but thousands and thousands of Filipino men were brought from the Philippines to the United States during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and mainly into the Central Valley of California, into the southern part. They mainly were grape pickers. And they were allowed to live in the United States, but get this, it was illegal for them to marry. So think about that for a minute. We rarely do this with European immigrants, right? Now, there was a time we did a little bit of that with indentured servants from Europe, but that was still much nicer. You lived in the house, you were kind of a friend. It still should have been better. But when you look at it, the history of U.S. immigration, quote unquote immigration, has often been purposely allowing, when it's been people of color from Asia, from Latin America and Africa, it's been forcing or quote unquote allowing people to come on special programs, but not really to be part of our community, not to be able to stay, and not to marry anyone in the United States. So I personally have been to the Bakersfield, Delano area of the United Farm Workers on many occasions. I personally met many elderly Filipino men who were in their 70s and 80s. They were never allowed to marry. So the United Farm Workers built a huge, huge housing complex called Agbayani Village to help these elderly single men. And people were brought in from Yemen to work in the fields. People have been brought in from Haiti. I'm not going to go much farther because we don't have a lot of time today, but one thing, there's a lot to say about U.S. immigration policy, but for me and for Working Family Solidarity, we look at the amount of people that have been let in, how many countries are given so many visas. So certain countries get a quota of how many people can come in via marriage, via brother and sister, via a work visa every year. And why we give certain countries a certain amount of certain visas, I think has a lot to do with race and with class. And so here's another example, and I'm going to end in just a couple minutes, and we're going to move forward to get other people's input. But a lot of people, and I'm trying to get into the neighborhoods that I work in the western, southwestern, and the south sides of Chicago. Our membership is about 95% African American and Latino. What we see here is a lot of tension between African Americans and Latinos who go and arrive at the same temp agency at 4 in the morning, all across Chicago, to try to get on that van and go somewhere to work for 8 hours for whatever wage, usually under very dangerous conditions. Right now with COVID-19, very dangerous conditions. And Latinos and African Americans wait in the same waiting room trying to get in that van. And in my personal experience organizing in Chicago over several years, I've seen those waiting rooms have tremendous tension as the supervisor says to 20 Latinos, get in those vans and go to work. And the African Americans are left saying, well, wait a second, what happened? I've been here since 3 a.m. I've been here 2 days in a row. And it's done, in my opinion, on purpose, because now the African Americans are not mad at the company or the staffing agency and not even mad at the supervisor. They end up getting mad at the Latino workers who got on the van. And so it produces a tension against immigrants by many people when really, in our analysis, if we united, then we could fight together. And I'm not going to go into these campaigns, but I've been a part of many campaigns where we've supported Latinos and African Americans to push for a list that has to be respected. First come, first serve, get on the van. And so we believe that the anti-immigrant hysteria, the title of our talk today, is largely promoted by wealthy, powerful people in our country because it keeps, if you want to say 99%, or at least the vast majority of us, low and moderate income families, it keeps us fighting each other instead of working together so that in the richest country on earth, people from all backgrounds have a decent job, a decent place to live, and so forth. So we believe that the anti-immigrant hysteria, the xenophobia, is overlapping with racism, especially at this time in our country. But again, it's pushed forward by very wealthy people. So in other words, it's not just that white folks don't like black folks and white and black folks and other folks born here don't like anyone coming from here. It's not just that. We believe that there's a plan to make sure that actually a lot of immigrants, especially of color and very poor, come into this country precisely to glut the labor market so that there's more workers per job and less power for workers. Let me close by giving you an example, and then we're going to open this up. I'm going to ask Reverend Campbell to say a few words right after this. I'm going to close with this example. The Nafta, right, the North American quote-unquote free trade agreement. Here's an example for you. And there's so many more, but I'm going to end with this. When that was done with Mexico years ago, many people thought that it was designed to help the economy of Mexico and help the economy of the United States by creating competitive advantage. That's not what was desired. What have we seen in the last 20 years? We've seen a huge influx of Mexican people, poor Mexican people, coming north just to try to survive. So I've heard people say, well, I guess NAFTA was a failure. And my response has been, it was not a failure. It was a huge success because it was designed to take capital, to take the factories south into Mexico, where people will work for pennies a day. And it was also designed to displace hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Mexican workers to desperately come north to look for work. And of course, when they get here, now there's more people competing for the same amount of jobs. So we find people in our neighborhoods in Chicago of all backgrounds very frustrated that why are all these poor Mexican immigrants willing to work for any amount per hour, and they don't fight back if they work in bad conditions. And we believe it's a plan, and that then we're pitted against each other once again, especially Black and Latinx people pitted against each other for any job, for housing, and anything else. So I'll close with this about NAFTA. Before NAFTA was allowed to happen, the United States government pressured the equivalent of the Mexican Congress. So they have a different way they do things with diputados and things like that, but essentially pressured their national legislative bodies to change major parts of the Constitution of Mexico regarding healthcare, regarding land ownership, and other things to appease the foreign companies that were going to come in under NAFTA and essentially displace a lot of Mexican people from certain valleys to plant crops, have factories come in, knowing that this would produce a bunch of really poor, even more poor Mexicans in Mexico and drive Mexicans north. So I close with that to show how U.S. immigration has really been about importing labor in official and unofficial ways to then compete with low-wage people of color and sometimes low-wage white workers here in the United States. So that's what I think goes on with U.S. immigration. Therefore, the wealthy folks have to promote xenophobia and anti-immigrant hysteria to make sure we don't all come together and fight the real enemy, which is our very wealthy oppressors. So that's what I think, in not as long as I probably should have to detail it. I would like to see if Reverend Campbell can come on, a board member with us. She's an ordained Lutheran minister. She and I have been working together on pushing for African American and Latinx solidarity, especially in jobs and housing in Chicago for about 10 years. So Reverend Campbell, if you are there, if
I'm
you could
still
come
here.
on. Yeah, if you could share a few words, and I know you have to leave soon for a meeting of Lutheran pastors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend. I'm sorry I called you Reverend, but thank you so much. You said everything I was going to say. My God. I pastor in Inglewood, New City. When I first got there, it was just African Americans. And of course, I started off by having a shelter. And then I slowly began to see the decline of African Americans in the community, and predominantly now it's Hispanics. I've been there several years, about 25 years almost, and I've seen the change. We are working together pretty good, but we still have our issues. Leone gave you a story. I want to give you a story that's very interesting. When I had a shelter, one of my women she was not in the shelter, but her son was working and he was killing sheep. He was Hispanic and he was getting 60 cents a day. When she told me that, and when he told me that, I was furious because that is simply unfair. And so that has forced me to get on the ball and the bandwagon and say, we have to get together. And oftentimes when the people come to the pantry, you know, some say you give the Hispanics more, you give the African Americans more. No, everybody gets equal. We are one people, one body, one Lord, one baptism. So we have to stick together. And like Leone says, the white culture, it is their intent to keep us divided. Whereas I think that if we come together, we can get more accomplished. So I've improved it. We're getting along better. I have some of the greatest Hispanic workers, African American workers. I have some of the greatest people that come through. But my concern now is this gap that they're still trying to even broaden when it comes to Hispanic and African American people. And again, when I had my shelter, a lot of the women went to the temp agency at 3 in the morning and never got on because of for some other reason, and they came back crying. That has to stop. And we have to work together and stand together and love each other and know that together we stand, divided, we fall. So my concern and my interest, and I will continue to be interested in that, is we have to come together as a family. We are all people of color. and we have to work, and we cannot let anyone get in between us. You know, it's just something about how our Euro-Americans, they insist on getting even between African Americans amongst each other and Latinos against each other. I'm tired of that. We have to stop it. So that's what I'm continuing to do, continue to fight and work with each other, love each other. I mean, they make the best Tostitos and best tacos I've ever had in my life. And they have to have it for me whenever we have our party, because that's what I want. And then they want fried chicken. So I understand. But we love each other. And so my point is, and my last word is, let's work together. We are one. Let's not fight each other. We need each other to survive. Thank you so much, Brother Leone. I hope I said something. I love you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Campbell. Reverend Campbell, I met almost exactly 10 years ago on West 51st Street near Damon. And I found out she had an after-school program for African-American, well, for all kids, but they happen to be maybe 2/3 Latino and 1/3 African-American. And I was working on worker rights, trying to bring together African-American and Latinx people at nearby temp staffing agencies. And we immediately bonded because the main thing she talked about is exactly what she said now. And I talked about my belief in solidarity, and we bonded right away, and we've worked together for almost 10, well, maybe more than 10 years, and she's on our board of directors. And I know she has to log off. She might have already logged off, or she will in a moment, but she has a meeting at 6:45 with a bunch of other Lutheran pastors, so she was very kind to come on. And again, these talks are designed to keep us together, and we want to stay in touch. Obviously, we have another hour, but to stay in touch after this call, so that Reverend Felicia's great work, she has a food pantry, she has an after-school program, she does all kinds of amazing stuff there at 1923 West 51st Street for folks in back of the yards in Inglewood. So, and that's sort of our second office out of Pilsen. I wanted to see, and thank you very much, Reverend Felicia. I feel like I found a sister the day I met her, and it's amazing that it continues. Well, thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Reverend. And I want to see if Adriana Avila wants to say a couple words, and then after that, as we move into comments, we're already beginning with a few people, and then I want to see after that, I will ask Daniel Ash if he wants to say a few things, and then we'll just keep going. Please go ahead, Adriana.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. I just want to acknowledge our sponsors who are helping us with this program. Healing Illinois, Chicago Community Trust are both partners in this series of racial justice dialogues. And I want to just remind you that the reason that we do this is to help you and to improve relations, not only with each other, but as it grows out into our community. So clearly we know that these talks are helpful. They help to bring up feelings and maybe old beliefs that kind of still stand with us today, and we're trying to break down those barriers and get united. And just like Reverend Felicia was saying, nobody's getting any more, we're all getting equal, and we all need each other. So I just want to remind you that Working Family Solidarity is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to bring you programming like this to help our community. And we certainly hope that you are able to support us with a donation. It's very easy to find us on the website with a donate button. And a lot of times employers this time of year have matching gift programs. So if you do have a job where they match the amount of money that you give to an organization, that's a great way to make your dollars stretch. And again, just thank you so much for the engagement and the support, and for helping us to bring better programming to all of you that is more meaningful and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Adriana and I met more than 10 years ago, probably more like 17, 18 years ago, 19 years ago, a long time ago. And also regarding worker issues and labor issues and the same issues that we're fighting for today. So Adriana helped design, well, didn't help, designed and put up our first website years ago, and has been helping us ever since. So a lot of these ties have continued. I want to see if Daniel Ash wants to say a couple of words, very short or not so short, um, about either Healing Illinois, the Chicago Community Trust, and also just what Daniel Ash has to say about all of this stuff. This is a great brother that I met a couple of years ago, and we've been collaborating ever since. I always tell people that you would be surprised in the foundations, the private foundations in Chicago. Sometime you have the stereotypical foundation that wants to fund something, and they fund it and contribute and kind of walk on. And Daniel's not one of those people. He's a great brother who really believes in everything we're doing, and he doesn't see himself as over there. He's trying to be part of and has become part of the community, and he's really he wants to continue to hear from all of us, and to help shape the kind of decisions that he and us together are making for the good of what the Chicago Community Trust is trying to do, where Daniel works, and that is to close the racial wealth gap and a whole bunch of other things. So Daniel, I know how busy you are. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you. Please say whatever you'd like.
Thank you, Leone. I'm not sure if you guys wanted to turn my camera on or not, but it's just so you know, for some reason I can't control it on my end. Um, I want to say sort of a couple of things. One, let me introduce myself. As Leone said, I work for the Chicago Community Trust. I'm the Associate VP for a portfolio called Building Collective Power. And we fund organizing, we fund community media, we fund resident-led campaigns across our city, but particularly those in Black and Latinx communities. At the Chicago Community Trust, our goal, our North Star goal as an institution is to close the racial and ethnic wealth gap. We landed on that goal just a little over a year ago. And our board and staff sort of made a commitment to sort of think big and be ambitious. We were tired of sort of responding to issues and symptoms of systemic issues, but we wanted to reform the system. So I start there because this work, these conversations are absolutely critical to undoing a system which has been designed to oppress. And if we want to liberate ourselves, we, as Leone said, we really have to work as a coalition. And that coalition is only as strong as the bonds of trust and affection that hold the coalition together. And we know at the Chicago Community Trust that white supremacy, the false notion of a hierarchy of human value where Blackness is at the bottom and whiteness at the top, sort of those beliefs have actually undermined, quite frankly, this democracy. And we need to have some truth telling about that in order to have the healing. And our belief is that the truth telling and the healing will lead to the type of coalitions that we need to actually transform systems to collective action, right? At the policy level, at the system level. So I often get asked this question, like, why, again, are we doing this? Why aren't you just focused on policy? Why aren't you just focused on legislative issues? And none of that is going to happen. Nothing progressive and nothing meaningful and nothing for the people without multicolored, multiracial, multi-ethnic groups coming together. And so again, I am very, very pleased that Working Family Solidarity is part of Healing Illinois, because quite frankly, they're leading by doing. And if we can multiply that by 1,000 other institutions across the state, we can do what the governor has asked us to do, is to create the conditions for the state of Illinois to be an explicitly anti-racist state. So again, I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. Leone?
Thank you, Daniel. We're really, really glad to have you here. Again, I mean, um, you know, I've gotten to know you and I know that you mean what you say, and that's why we really want you to be here, and I appreciate it. We're going to move in. First of all, again, what I've learned, because of course, before a few months ago, we didn't do these. We talked in person, so I can kind of see your face. I can read the crowd. I kind of see who's wanting to say something, who's not, who hopes I don't sort of call on them. So this is a little different as we move forward. So again, I want to say, first of all, to the people who are not used to this at all, it's kind of weird. You're looking at a screen, right? You're not used to doing this. We have a lot of people on the phone and on the video who are low-wage workers. And I thank you for being on the call, and you all know who you are, and I'm glad you're here. And if you are frankly too exhausted to talk, you can just write something in the chat. It can be simple. It can be, I think what you're saying makes sense. It can be, I don't really trust members of a certain community. What we have found is if we don't create a space where people feel comfortable saying how they feel, not that they're right and not that they're wrong, but where they actually can say how they feel, then they're going to say that somewhere else, right? They're going to say it outside of our orbit, and we can no longer then say, well, gosh, that's interesting. Why do you feel that way about that group? I'm actually concerned and I want to hear what you have to say. So please say something. You can also put it in the chat. What I'm going to do is urge a couple of specific people to perhaps say something who might be a little more used to this kind of format, to give other folks a minute to collect your thoughts. Axel, can you hear me?
Yes, Leone,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, so
Unfortunately, my camera is not working, but
okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so give me 1 sec. So I am asking a good friend. We go back a bunch of years. I'll leave out how, but we've been working together in the movement for worker justice, racial justice, and immigrant worker justice for many years. I consider him honestly like a brother. He lives in Missouri, so he's calling from out of state. I'm absolutely honored to have Axel Fuentes, Executive Director of the Rural Community Workers Alliance, with us. And Axel, I wonder if you wanted to have a comment on what we're talking about so far, or something totally new.
Absolutely, Leone, and I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And first of all, I have to say that I feel really honored and conociendo a este gran hombre, I feel like it's even a privilege of knowing you and being your friend. We worked together in the past, and I learned a lot from you. And now, being here in Missouri, I can see that, yes, absolutely, this racism, I never seen before raising this racism more than the last 4 years. The area where I live surrounded by a lot of racist people, even with tattoos that is white power. I have seen that, and a lot of flags that is openly expressing that. And unfortunately, what I can see is that the people that have those ideas in their brain are actually working probably in the same place where many of people of color are working. Recently, we found signs on the street against the African community, which been growing in this area, and and I what I have noticed is also that the capitalism or the big companies take advantage of this division between people of color or whites. The advantage is for them to keep oppressing the working class. In this area, most are meat processing plants, and the company uses that to divide the workers. Because if the workers get together, they are going to be asking for better working conditions or better benefits. And the company knows that putting the Latinos against the Africans or the Africans against the whites or vice versa, they are achieving something, which is keeping the people divided, and that's for them the best thing to do to increase their profits, because they are going to keep all the group working, exploiting, mistreating, and it's going to be harder and more difficult for the workers to come together to ask for better working conditions. We've been doing some racial gatherings up here also, and when we get into the conversation, we definitely can see that we all are suffering from the same problems, or we have almost similar issues in our countries, and we came to this country. But unfortunately here, we can see also how the workers are fighting for the jobs. But because the companies are doing that, the companies are putting that in people's minds, putting the same as they did with the Salvadorians, putting them against the Mexicans or the Guatemalans against the Hondurans. So the companies are taking advantage of that. So the only how we can get off of that is if we just can see at each other equal. If we can come together, if we stick together, that's the only way how we can overcome those barriers. So thank you so much, Leone, and thank you, Working Family Solidarity, for doing this.
Axel, thanks for being part of it. We're going to move on to see who else would like to say something. And one thing I want to briefly say is Axel and I continuing to be in contact and support each other. And what we found is the similarities of poor and low and moderate income families of color, and in many cases whites, in the Chicago area is very similar. A lot of details are different, but very strikingly similar to the lives of poor working people of color in northern Missouri. At this huge Smithfield pork processing company and a number of other processing facilities where Latin American immigrants and African immigrants and white folks work. So it's really interesting to support each other and sort of break that barrier of Axel and his people there feeling isolated. And we're going through very similar things, so we're trying to go through them together and make sure that we don't feel isolated. I wonder if there is anyone that would like to go next, someone who lives in Chicago, someone from somewhere else. I know we have one at least Italian guest. We're actually, I'll quickly say this, we will be figuring out how to do a webinar or a Zoom dialogue with some of our colleagues in Europe. We'll probably pick a Saturday late morning, so that right now they're staying up like in the early hours to be with us today. But we're going to try to find a time when we can talk more to sort of compare how racism and worker oppression works in Europe and the United States and support each other. Is there anyone who would like to say a word or two or put something in the message? If Asia has seen any message that you would like to relay to us, Asia?
A lot of the comments have just been in support of what you and some of the other guests have been saying. So the most recent comment, it's also been a little bit difficult because they're all named Leone, so I don't know who's talking, but I
Sorry.
the speaker said about this being an issue of capitalism in general. On a fundamental level, capitalism prioritizes profit over people. Capitalism mixed with our country's history of racism have created these problems that persist today. From Katie.
Katie, okay, That's Caitlin Craig. Matthew, are you able to hear me? Do you want to add any kind of comment?
Can you hear me?
Yes, and sorry to call you out. I appreciate you answering. I just will quickly say this young brother, Matthew Robinson, we're really honored to have him as a board member with Working Family Solidarity. But Matthew, any comment you have would love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First of all, thanks for everyone for being here. I'm a board member with Working Family Solidarity. It is definitely a pleasure and a privilege to work with Leone and so many other community partners in Chicago. The mission's so important. So if this is the first time you're joining us, definitely welcome. We usually do teach-ins and dialogues like this, and just want to thank you again for spending some time with us this evening. I didn't have anything like specific to say, but maybe I can start with a question that's usually on my mind when we talk about solidarity between Black and Latino folks. I am wondering if anyone can help me with a problem, with a question that I have. Usually when I'm trying to have this conversation with other Black folks, usually in a professional context, you know, acquaintances, friends, they have this idea, and this is how they put it. They say that we have different priorities. And by we, they mean the Mexican community in Chicago, Latinx community, and the Black community. And I'm trying to wrap my head around that and come up with a response. So it's kind of a question that I'm putting out there for our dialogue, because that's really what this meeting this evening is for us to just talk and share ideas. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on that, Leone, or anyone, Daniel, anyone that's on the call with us today? I just want to put that question out there. And I think that a lot of the other people that have mentioned that kind of the default attitude that we have in the US as workers is that we're kind of competing against each other, and that we have, for some reason, these different priorities. So how do we wrap our heads around that, and what's a way to move past that kind of being the default that we always fall to? If anyone has a comment or follow up on that, I would appreciate talking to you about it.
Thanks, Matthew. Would anyone like to follow up that comment?
May I, Leona, can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
This is Daniel, again from the Trust. First of all, I think that the observation is a very astute one, right? That the fact
Hola, yo
that
quisiera participar un poco acerca de esto. Hola.
Hey, hello. Sí.
Sí, me gustaría participar acerca de esto, de entender un poco más acerca de por qué los latinos combaten o tienen diferencias entre los propios latinos. Bueno,
Okay,
una de las razones de que por qué los latinos y los negros o la comunidad afroamericana es por la diferencia de culturas que tenemos. La diferencia de culturas entre un mexicano y un centroamericano es abismal, no es la misma cultura que tenemos. Puede cambiar, puede ser también por diferencias de cultura, incluso hasta de...
So,
Somos católicos guadalupanos.
can you hear me, Daniel?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, so I muted this person. I'm not sure who it is. He did not have a bad comment. He was not saying something nasty. I did want to see if we can go ahead because he did interrupt you, and then I'm going to see if we can help him get on the translation thing so that he might have gotten on late, and I'm not sure who it was. So he began talking about differences in cultures between Mexican people and Central American people and Latinx people in general and Black people. And I'll see if we can find a way to get him to speak again, but somehow through the interpretation system, he might have come on a little late. So I apologize for muting that person, but I'm not sure what else to do at this moment. So Daniel, please go ahead and we'll see if we can get this brother back on through the interpretation system.
Okay, and I mean that's totally fine, and I would love to hear the full translation of the comment. What I was going to say is to the previous comment. I thought it was an astute observation because whenever this issue does come up, and as I say this as a Black man, you know, you do hear that comment of like, well, we have different priorities, we have different agendas, and again, I think that instinct is rooted in this idea that we have less in common than we have in common, right? Like we don't have commonality, we don't have common ground. Like we need to be oppositional. And Leona, what the point I want to make is that again, we sort of bring to the table, I think, the lens of race and ethnicity and one group versus another group. But when you bring the lens of worker, of wage earner, I think that opens up, has the potential to open up and expand perspective. But I think that takes time, right? And again, I didn't hear haven't heard the full translation of the comment, but even when I hear commentary about sort of cultural sort of ethos that guide sort of Latinos or Latinx folk versus Black folks, I think sometimes when people highlight these differences, and I've heard this even among friends at my kids' soccer team, right? This idea that, well, we want to work. A lot of Black folks don't want to work, right? That's rooted in white supremacy, right? It's rooted in a belief system that has been designed to dehumanize people and then create the conditions for conflict and division. So again, having conversations like this one, to me, open up the opportunity to learn, right? Things that we've learned, develop sort of deeper empathy and understanding for different sort of groups, and then find space for connection and ultimately coalition, right? Again, it doesn't happen overnight, but it happens with moments like this where you're working to ascertain the truth in order to heal, and then ultimately in order to create moments of transformation.
Yeah, you mind if I respond here?
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, we definitely do have differences, right? If you want to talk about religion, if you want to talk about work ethic, I wouldn't say so much. It's more of an individual thing. But I'll just give an example of, I don't believe that we have to have the same religion or the same upbringing to work together as workers. For example, my own workplace, every person here is a different race, different ethnicity. And we still work together, right? I'm sure there are crazy cultural differences between us here, but that doesn't need to come into play when we are just working. So
Absolutely, absolutely. If anything, it should enhance the workplace. You know, what we find in business is that different perspectives, different cultures, different perspectives, and it's optimize, enrich spaces of learning, spaces of working. Um, and but then when it comes to, I think, us thinking about reform, like be it on the labor front, be it, think about the fair tax, that the campaign around the fair tax, could have been a moment where we saw greater, deeper solidarity. And again, it should have been a moment where we've come together, but I don't think we had enough trust, particularly across the state, to sort of bring the networks together that needed to be brought together in order to achieve a reform that would have benefited all communities, right? Again, I know that's a political perspective, and I'm revealing my bias there, but that was a policy that would have benefited many, many, many Black and Latinx households. But there were many folks in our respective communities that bought into this idea that one day too, I'm going to be the landowner, I'm going to be the company owner, and therefore I should protect my tax, my income now for income that I most likely you'll never ever realize under the current conditions.
yeah, I'd be interested to hear what Axel has to say, since he's organizing people who are working in like oppressive conditions, more so, or vulnerable to it. What happens when you try to have those conversations in Missouri, Axel, if you're still there?
Yes, I'm still here. What we found out up here is that it's very interesting, because at the beginning of these conversations, I was having a lot of people that they were like, oh, no, we don't really want to get into this because we don't want to hurt feelings, or we don't want to make others to be mad at us. But I always said, okay, you are already divided. You are already suffering from the same oppressor. And if we don't get to the table, and if we don't get out what our feelings are, or if we don't get out what we are thinking about the others, we may still keep divided. So I just the reason how we address this is we just brought people to eat with not even an agenda, because we were going to create an agenda in that table. But at the beginning, a lot of people were like, no, I'm not going to be part of this. I don't want to get part of this. This worker is not doing his job up there. And others saying, oh no, he's thinking that I'm coming up here to take his job. So those kind of comments. So at the end, I noticed that in the room, when we all came in the room, we all shake hands. We all shake hands. Even when they were saying, no, this guy is going to be mad, or people that in the work line, they were fighting. But when we came in the room, they all shake hands. So that's what we started just opening up, okay, how the conditions in your country were. I have to say that the conversations that we are having are actually with immigrants from Africa, from Congo, Senegal, Tanzania, and other countries from Africa, majority people of color, and also Latinx from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, from Ecuador. And so the situation there that we asked people from different countries to talk a little bit about the conditions out there, and we all were poor. We all were poor people. and we all were struggling up there. And then we came to the United States, and we all came to struggle up here too. Many of us, we came up here, and we had a hard time. And then we realized that we were all equal, passing by the same situations. But there was the managers or supervisors, they were the ones that were taking advantage of that, because they knew that putting the Africans against the Latinos, or the Latinx against the Africans, or the whites, they were just happy with that situation in the work line, because they were making the production done, and the workers were against each other. With my neighbor, I have a neighbor just here in my backyard. He's totally clear that he's white supremacist. He has a big tattoo. And I just talked to him. I have to be honest, and I gotta take my distance, because sometimes I try to be educated, and I say hi. Sometimes he responded, sometimes he doesn't respond to me, but I don't really pay too much attention for that. But what I can tell you is that depends also the situation that the country is passing by in the political arena too, because that is coming to wake up many of people that are hiding those resentments, or hiding this white sentiment that is inside them, bringing like, oh, now we are getting invaded in this community by the Latinx or by the Africans. And obviously that is bringing some actions of totally clear racism. We have people here in the store that went against the Muslims, and totally clear in the Walmart store, where people front just on your face can tell you, hey, don't speak Spanish. Use it straight like that. On the stores here, and this is everywhere too. But up here we can see this more often. So I think if we don't change the also the way of education in our schools, we have to change our new generations, because we have to start early with the kids, and that's a way how we can probably start to rid off of that mentality that many of the white supremacists that are or elderly, they are probably going to pass away, but the new generations probably can learn a little bit better that we are all the same, that we are all in the religious point, we are all sons and daughters of God, or humans that belong to God. Hopefully one day we all can understand that, and we don't see colors of our skin, or our costumes, or culture as a barrier. Instead, we can bring it that as to enrich us, to make us better, and make these societies, make our world better. So thank you.
Thanks, Axel. I want to proudly say that not only have Axel and I worked together for a few years, as colleagues in the same organization back some years when we worked on a project throughout the Midwest and Plain States called the Midwest Immigrant Health Project. So it was workers and health and communities. But I can also say that Axel was one of the founding board members of Working Family Solidarity. So even though he lives in northern Missouri, he's been supporting us for many years, and I've tried to support Rural Community Workers Alliance for many years in any way that I can. So we have a great sort of interstate alliance going. I wonder, let me just add one thing here and just say that one of the things that I mentioned early on, and it feels like other people have brought up as well, not just because I mentioned it, but is the important overlap of class and workers. And it's impossible to talk about race, racial divisiveness, racism, anti-immigrant. A lot of times we say xenophobia, and anti-immigrant sentiment. And what we're really talking about is anti-people of color. We're not talking about anti-Polish Americans, Italian Americans. My father was an Italian immigrant. My mother was a Mexican immigrant. You can imagine they had very different experiences. It's not to say that European immigrants to this country do not deserve full respect and integrity. They obviously do. But when we talk about anti-immigrant hysteria, when you lift the cover, that's a nice sort of sanitized way of saying we are just as racist against people of color who were not born in the United States as we are against people of color who were born in the United States. So it ultimately becomes about that stratification on racial lines and how that benefits a very few small percentage of wealthy people. And I repeat that because for Working Family Solidarity, whether it's anti-immigrant sort of teaching or racial justice dialogue or criminal justice system, many of you have been with us now for a bunch of weeks. I'm surprised in a way we have this many people today because some of you have been with us now for a number of webinar, of Zoom calls, and it's a lot less personal. So I really appreciate how many people have continued to stay with us. And we're trying to, again, continue to build this trust and solidarity. We're going to have another, we're going to still go for a little bit longer today, but we're going to have another racial unity dialogue in January. We'll let you know when for a couple of reasons. We're checking on a few dates. We don't want to do it at the same time as a couple of ally organizations. So we need a minute, but we'll let you all know it'll be mid or late January, and it will focus on African Americans and Black people, especially as we go into the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, which this year will fall on Monday, January 18th. Many of you remember, if you're as old as I am, or maybe slightly older or slightly younger, that Martin Luther King in the last year or couple years before he was assassinated, what was he talking about? And the very specific answer was literally the name that Martin Luther King Jr. chose, a poor people's campaign. He began to talk against the military-industrial complex, the war in Vietnam, where white, Latino, Indian, as in American, Native American, Black, Asian, all kinds of Americans were being killed or committing suicide when they came back, right? And that united a lot of families from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. And Martin Luther King Jr. used to talk about that, as did Malcolm X towards the end of his life, right? Second trip back from Mecca. And he began to say that I may now be willing to work with lighter skinned people as long as their work is intelligently designed to get results. That's a quote. So he was starting to look into the class issue and how that works together with racism. So that's something that we can't finish tonight, of course, but I really appreciate people talking thus far, and we still do have some time. If someone else would like to say something, we are at 7:21 on my computer's clock, so we won't go a lot longer, but we do have some more time, and I welcome anyone's thought. If you don't want to speak, please put it in chat. Asia, I don't know if there's something in chat perhaps that you could let us know about if no one wants to say it.
Leone, I wonder if we can go back to the topic of the hardships that we have within our own community of Mexicans, Latin Americans, Central Americans.
Sure. Did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get to my button.
Please. Yeah, because a lot of people forget, right? A lot of us Latinos are born here, and sometimes we fall victim to anti-immigrant sentiments, even though we're Latino, right? So anyway, but please.
I do think that there, and there are a couple of ways that we're experiencing it. You're experiencing it from the, people who were born here versus immigrants. But I think that historically, we've had, the same kind of conflicts within our own groups based on skin color. And you'll see even in Mexico, the darker your skin is, you're going to be treated a certain way. I have cousins who have very light eyes and light hair, and, they're treated another way because we're looking at these physical attributes and prejudging. And it's no different than what we do with other folks. And there is a certain, I think, pride that comes with, we do things this way. This is our, these are our customs, and there's a lot of pride in that. But the danger lies in thinking that it's better than someone else, or that you're somehow in competition. And this goes back to the whole notion of, it's a dog eat dog world. We're all fighting for scraps, and we're all trying to make ends meet and living under the same types of conditions and challenges. And so I do think that there is, I feel like I've been saying this a lot in this past week. It's the way that I parent. It's just my philosophy in life that you have two approaches to everything that you do, whether it's in your work world or in your personal world. And you can either help or you can hurt. So how are you yourself contributing to these conversations? Are we being open? Are we welcoming the information and just not being judgmental about how people do things because it may be different than the way that your family does things? It happens, peer to peer, and then it happens to all those around you. So are you yourself saying negative things? Maybe it's, you're not even aware of it, but you somehow are treating somebody differently based on one of these preconceived notions that you grew up with. And how do you stop that? It could just be as simple as don't spread it. Don't spread more stereotypes, and don't judge. Just be helpful. Help your fellow community members, and try not to give into sort of the, Spanish we call chisme, sort of like the gossip, because it's not productive. That's not helpful for any of us, no matter what the situation is. But especially when it comes to race relations, even over the holidays as you're home and, maybe talking to family members on the telephone, or having more calls, and you start talking about the news and you start talking about things that are going on in the world. Be aware of how you're talking about people that you're seeing everyday situations, because your kids are hearing that. I know I come from a family where people would say things that were not inclusive, and I always called people out for it because your kids are listening. So if you're saying that, then your kids are picking that up, and then they're sort of trucking that on and carrying it on. So I think it's important, just in everyday life, especially in the workplace. But again, hopefully that's a little way that you can make a small change, and hopefully, it kind of trickles and more people start speaking up, or more people start, being aware of what they're saying, so that you aren't further hurting any of those relationships between our communities.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adriana. And I heard that perhaps Claudia Galeno here in Chicago had something to say, I
¿Me
think.
escuchan?
I'm not sure if you want to say it in English or
Leone, ¿me
Spanish.
escuchan? Español, ¿pero me escuchan?
Sí,
¿Sí me escuchan?
sí te escuchamos.
Oh, perfecto. Sí, a mí me gustaría compartir algo. Yo, soy mexicana, no nací en este país y me gustaría compartir un poquito sobre mis experiencias, sobre cómo yo veo la inmigración. Yo creo que es un diseño para mantener a la gente de una manera reprimida, con miedo, porque desde que llegas de una manera llamada ilegal. Entonces llegas con miedos y cuando llegas a este país simplemente te da miedo todo, no te pagan en ocasiones ni... En ocasiones no te pagan ni el salario mínimo, en ocasiones no te pagan el overtime. Y entonces, en todos momentos, yo creo que no llega uno hablando inglés. Y entonces, en todos momentos vives con miedo, vives con la incertidumbre de lo que va a pasar y te cierran las puertas por todos lados. Entonces, lo que yo vi con una amiga europea que tenía yo polaca, es que no pasa lo mismo. Ellos no andan aquí con miedo, ellos no andan aquí ganando el salario mínimo. No sé si estoy hablando muy despacio o muy alto, pero me avisan. Y entonces es muy diferente, aunque ella no tenía documentos, no tenía tampoco su residencia ni nada, su visa se le había vencido, pero ellos no tienen ningún miedo como nosotros. Ellos siempre ganan un salario más alto que nosotros y de hecho no tienen, en ocasiones siento que no tienen ni siquiera ¿cómo se dice? La urgencia de convertirse en ciudadanos, porque no tienen el miedo que nosotros tenemos. ¿Y qué más? Y yo creo que por eso es todo es un plan. Es como cuando la mujer sufre violencia doméstica. La convencen de que tenga miedo, de que no puede, de que nadie te va a querer, te aguantas o te mueres de hambre si te vas de mí. Entonces lo mismo hacen con la gente inmigrante. Nos tienen como peleando unos a otros para mantenernos con el pie en el cuello.
Thank you. Muchas gracias, Clau. So thank you very much, Claudia. I will simply say very briefly, in case someone who doesn't speak Spanish was not on the English channel to get the interpretation, a very brief sort of summary of what Claudia said. Claudia is from the state of Puebla in Mexico, southeast of Mexico City. She's been in the country about 17, 18 years. She worked for about 10 years in low wage work in this area, undocumented. Essentially, summing up, she said that we, immigrants of color, I'm from Mexico. My experience in the Chicago area is the immigrants from Poland, for example, although they were immigrants, and I even had a very good friend from Poland who was undocumented, like I was, doing all these low-wage works. But I found getting to know her and many undocumented Polish friends of hers in Chicago, they had far less fear than we Mexican undocumented immigrants. They did not fear, that la migra, that immigration was going to bust down their doors the way we were afraid. They were not as afraid at work of an immigration raid or an I-9 audit. And I began to see that the difference was clearly about immigration documents, but it was also about racial matters, because it was mainly Mexican undocumented immigrants and immigrants from other countries, other people of color who were undocumented, that were much more fearful, like I was. And I think At first, I thought this was just the way the world kind of happened to come together. But over time, I began to realize that this was a very well-constructed plan to make sure that people of color from various countries and within the United States fought each other instead of working together. And more than anything, that we were always very afraid, and that we were so afraid of many different things that could happen to us that we didn't want to raise our voices. So I wanted to share that point of view. So we are at 7:33, and I think we may have had one or two people leave. You're welcome to stay a little longer. I do want to end a little bit soon, just to respect people's time, but we can go slightly longer. Asia, please go ahead.
I just wanted to bring to your attention that we have someone who would like to comment before I guess to close.
Please go ahead.
Okay, Christian. Not sure. He's one of the Leones.
Gosh, sorry about that.
But he's saying that he wanted to comment.
Christian, ¿quieres comentar? Would you like to comment, Christian?
¿Sí me escuchan?
Sí.
Ok, perfecto. Bueno, son dos comentarios. Uno es acerca, antes que nada, déjenme presentarme. Mi nombre es Cristian. Bueno, mis comentarios es acerca del problema que tenemos nosotros como cultura latina con otro tipo digamos, nosotros como mexicanos no tenemos la misma cultura que los centroamericanos o que los sudamericanos, y mucho menos las personas afroamericanas o del continente africano no tenemos las mismas culturas que ellos. Por eso es el tema de que hay veces que nosotros discutimos o competimos contra los mismos hispanos o latinos. De hecho, hasta en tipo de religiones somos totalmente diferentes y opuestos. Y no se puede decir en la ideología política porque lamentablemente, como usted estaba hablando del NAFTA, el NAFTA solamente fue creado para destrozar el campesinado mexicano, que la mayoría, más del 80% de migrantes que vienen de México, pues, lamentablemente salieron de un exilio económico porque en el campo mexicano está totalmente devastado. Ese es uno de mis comentarios. Y acerca del comentario de europeos, pues también es otro tipo de paradigma y también otro tipo de pensamiento, porque lamentablemente nosotros nos enfocamos mucho más en trabajar y no en educarnos. Nosotros deberíamos de buscar educación, tal vez no gratuita, pero sí un poco más accesible, porque lamentablemente estamos metidos en la mitad de un problema enorme. Primero fueron las medidas anti-inmigrantes del presidente Trump, y por otra parte, también por parte de nuestro mismo gobierno, que por cierto, somos una gran mayoría de mexicanos viviendo en este país. Lamentablemente no tenemos ese apoyo para educarnos. Y lamentablemente, pues eso es lo que a nosotros no nos ayuda en nada. La diferencia entre un migrante mexicano a un migrante que viene de la India o de China, ellos vienen a prepararse y a educarse, y nosotros nada más venimos a hacer dinero. Esa es la diferencia que hay entre una cultura y otra.
Cristian, ¿puedo interrumpirte?
Claro.
Cristian, mira, lo que yo creo es que no importa aunque laves platos, laves pisos, la gente se tiene que respetar y tiene que pagarle por lo menos el mínimo, ni siquiera el mínimo es justo. Y mucho menos a la gente le están pagando menos del mínimo y muchas veces le roban su overtime. No importa, aunque la gente venga a lavar trastes, no importa que venga a lavar pisos, porque nos hacen lavar los pisos a rodillas. No importa, aunque sea con eso, tienen que tratar a la gente con respeto, como todos nos merecemos que nos traten con respeto. No importa si somos del color que seamos.
Ok, lo que yo estoy diciendo, no estoy hablando de un ¿cómo le puedo decir? De abuso del trabajo. Yo estoy hablando de que nuestro pensamiento debería de cambiar un poco. Yo no estoy, bueno, en mi caso, ¿verdad? Yo mucho tiempo también trabajé yo en fábrica. Yo también sufrí de esos abusos, pero para ya no tener esos problemas, ¿qué es lo mejor? Es educarse un poco o mucho más. No estoy diciendo de cambio de color o que haya preferencia, porque sí hay preferencias, hasta en mi mismo trabajo hay preferencias, ¿no? Hay cierto estatus adentro de los trabajos. Me tengo que acostumbrar a lo que hago, pues lo tengo que hacer, porque si no es muy difícil encontrar un trabajo en el que más o menos pueda yo sobrevivir, y más en esta ciudad que es súper carísima. Yo lo que trato de decir es que nosotros deberíamos de buscar más educación. Si, por ejemplo, tenemos tiempo de ver la novela o estar en el Facebook, también podríamos tener tiempo de tomar una clase en línea de cualquier tipo de educación que te den, pero que sea asequible, no que tenga un precio de 15 o 20 mil dólares. Lamentablemente, en esta sociedad, los más perjudicados en educación solamente son dos etnias, que sería la hispana latina, mejor dicho, la latina, y la afroamericana, que son de los que tienen menos educación en los Estados Unidos, lamentablemente.
Perdona, Cristian, pero siempre se van a necesitar personas que laven trastes, siempre se van a necesitar personas que hagan el aseo, siempre se van a necesitar personas que te salgan a pasear el perro, pero el hecho de que hagan ese tipo de trabajos no significa que van a quitarles su humanidad, no significa que van a faltarles al respeto, no significa que les van a robar.
Pero yo no estoy hablando de eso, yo estoy diciendo que si no queremos pasar por eso mismo, tenemos que educarnos.
Mira, un segundo. Me gusta mucho el diálogo. Nomás quiero ver porque son 20 para las 8 y creo, hemos podido oír algo de Cristian, también de Claudia. Sí, no sé si me equivoco, pero Guadalupe Ramírez, creo que veo que Guadalupe dice que yo también quiero comentar. No sé, Guadalupe, si estás aquí todavía. Ya vamos a terminar algo pronto, pero tenemos unos minutos más. No sé si todavía estás aquí con nosotros, Guadalupe. Tal vez no.
Papi.
¿Sí?
Papi.
Es mi niña. No, es mi niña. That's my daughter talking. No te estoy diciendo a ti, Clarita. Guadalupe, ¿tú querías decir algo más? Did you want to say something else, Guadalupe? Okay. Okay. Did anyone else? I like the conversation very much. Cristian saying a bunch of interesting things about how we Latinos, Latinas need to also look to educate ourselves, but that education also has to be lower in price because it's not accessible to many poor immigrants. Claudia was saying that's true, but also even if we're washing dishes or doing any kind of job, we need to make sure that we are paid and respected, because there will always be people that have to do that kind of work, and those people should be respected. We're going to have to end very soon. I'm not sure. Asia, can you help me to figure out who might be next before we wrap this up?
The last comment that I was looking at was from Guadalupe, but I don't think that they're here anymore.
Yeah, I didn't hear Lupe when I told her in Spanish. She didn't answer. Who might be next before we wrap up? We're going to end very soon. Was that it, Asia? Did you have anyone else?
I don't think
No. Okay, look, so let me do this. We're going to wrap up. It's almost 7:45, and we're going to have another dialogue in January, although the focus and to have us focus together on a certain theme is going to be African Americans, just like today was about anti-immigrant hysteria, but we end up talking about a lot of other poor people, and especially other poor people of color. So just because you're not Black, because you're not African American, I hope you will consider joining us in January. We will get you the date. Again, we had said it, but we heard about some folks that were doing something that same evening, so we kind of backed off. We will let you know as soon as possible, within a couple of days, either tomorrow or early next week, the exact date in January. The very earliest would be like the second week or so, and it might be the third week. We will let you know as soon as we know. But again, the topic will be African Americans, but we hope you'll join if you're Latinx, Asian, white, Native American, whatever your identity is. What we like to say at Working Family Solidarity is you are the culture that you come from. That is important. That is your cultural identity as a Latinx person, African American, or what have you. You can have certain identities, but we're all multifaceted, and we can still realize that we're all workers. We are African American workers, Latinx workers, Asian American workers, not just really, really poor and standing on the corner trying to wash someone's windshield. That is a very poor worker. They are absolutely part of our movement. But even if you make a little more money, you're a teacher or you're a government worker, you're still a worker. You still can be fired tomorrow, and you still sell your labor to make other people very wealthy. So let's stick together as workers. Let's try to come back together in January. I thank you so much for hanging in there and being part of our dialogue today. Les agradezco muchísimo por estar con nosotros hoy. Thank you very, very much. We're going to end the Zoom call now. Let's stay in touch. Email us at any time at workingfamilysolidarity.org. As I say bye, my daughter, and my daughter Claudita, come here, and my little boy Leonchino are here, but you got to come up here. No te van a ver. They're saying bye. Bye bye. Adios. Adios. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye bye. Little one, that's horrible.
Thank you, and we'll make this recording available. Thank you. Thank you very much also to Somos Sur. I know some of you have left. Thank you very much to Somos Sur, as I mentioned at the beginning, for interpreting.
Esta es la pulsera que hice para mi papi.
Oh, gracias. Wow. My daughter made me a little pulsera, a little kind of wristband, little bracelet. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Huggy.
Thanks, Axel.
Huggy
Thanks, Reverend. Ven
Huggy.
acá. Siéntate acá.
Huggy.
Pues ya se han ido, ven.
Huggy.
Siéntate.
Mr. Huggy.
Oh.
Bye.
Ciao. Ciao, Brigida.
So, Bridget?
Ciao.
Ciao, Bridget.
Ciao. A los italianos. Adiós.
Adios.
¿Qué dijiste?
Adios.
¿Cuál adiós?
That was an echo. Look.
Claudita,
Echo. Papi.
Claudita.
Papi.
Mira, te habla.
Hola.
Claudita, hola.
¿Quién es?
Hola.
Hola, Claudita. Bye.
Es mami. Mami te habla. Ay, ay, ay. Choki, ¿qué estás haciendo? ¿Cuál nada?
Te voy a dar un huggy en 10 segundos. 1, 2.
Bye.
Hey, Leone,
Hey.
let me download the chat and then I can email it to you.
Okay. Either way. Yeah, email it. Email it just so I make sure I get it. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I will see you another time.
Thank you very much for everything. Really appreciate it, Asia. Good luck with all the other stuff you got going.
Thank you so much. Good night.
All right, good night. ¿Qué pasó, Chocolinis?
Papi.
Bobby's just hanging out a second to see if anyone else is still on here. ¿Qué pasó,
You
Chocolini?
and someone else. I think it's mommy because
No, it's not mommy. I think it's probably Cristal or Cecilia. Ya se hicieron famosos, llegaron, they said, ah. That's it. I'm the only one left now. I was just waiting. Yeah, I'm gonna stop it here. Espérate.